Good morning, everybody. Happy 75th birthday to the good old NHS. And welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by my fellow Mirror columnist and associate editor, Kevin Maguire. Good morning, Kevin.
Morning, Foxy.
Now, this is the People's Paper Review, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. We will do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast are just going to have to work your way along the waiting list and hope someone gets to you soon. So, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on a big interview with the former GMTV presenter and Mirror columnist Fiona Phillips, a long-time Alzheimer's campaigner who has now revealed that she's been diagnosed with the illness herself. Now 62 and with two sons in their 20s, she and her husband have decided to raise more awareness by talking about how it's affected them and their family. It's very much worth some of your time today to read that story. So please try and go and hunt it out. There's nothing in there really to argue about, though. So we're going to do some other stuff. First off, we want to take you to page 24, where, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong now, this is saying that everyone in the country has access to a defibrillator if they have a heart attack. Yes?
Well, yes and no. If you live in a deprived area, and the northeast of England is not the most affluent. It's got lively pockets and a lovely place. I'm from it, but you're less likely to be saved because there are fewer defibrillators. It's an astonishing figure from Linlithgow and East Falkirk SNP MP. Martin Day from Scotland, who says if you have a cardiac arrest outside of hospital, you're 60% less likely to survive in a deprived area because the defib isn't there to save you, which is terrible. I know the poor always get the worst of it. That's why they're poor.
There are defibrillators. There is the tech to go have this in your local post office or on a shop wall or something. That's all there, and yet it just doesn't go to the poorer areas who, correct me if I'm wrong, are more likely to have the heart attacks, aren't they? Yeah, well,
if you're suffering, poverty creates ill health. Ill health can create poverty. So yes, and the Mirror's campaigned on this long and hard and had some great success because defibrillators are now more common, as you mentioned, in shopping areas or sports grounds, where kids play football, rugby, cricket, hockey, whatever, because too many people were dying where they could have been saved. But the defibs have got more to the affluent, dare I say, middle-class areas rather than less affluent working-class areas. And that's something that needs to be corrected. The government has a £1 million scheme for organisations to bid. That'll buy about 1,000 of these devices. But it's astonishing. In a poor area, you get the worst housing, you get the worst education, you get the worst health. The police service will be worse, and now you're more likely to die if you have a cardiac arrest. That's where your heart actually stops. It's just got to be corrected. You just basically need a central government that's deciding that if it genuinely wants to level up, actually genuinely wants to do that, you will make sure that the most deprived areas get things like defibs first.
Yeah, get the most help. It seems to make sense. Now, what do you think, everybody? Have you got a defibrillator in your area? Are you from the northeast? What do you think about how this scheme would work? Mahai says, wine and cheese parties reduces the risk of cardiac arrest. Well, I think if Boris Johnson had one, that he'd be a defibrillator probably quite nearby, considering that he's got a lifelong police protection. And you'd have obviously CPR and first aid as well. But having these defibrillators on your sort of local wherever you might be living, somewhere in the local shopping centre or something, actually increases the likelihood that a bystander will come along and be able to do the CPR that can save your life. It's happened to a friend of mine recently whose heart stopped while he was playing walking football, and he happened to be with some people in the leisure centre. There was a defib in the leisure centre. People were pumping his chest. Someone ran for the defib and got his heart started again, and that's why he's still with us fundamentally. Now, John says it's called the inverse care law, so people actually care less for the people who need it the most. Aren't human beings nice people? So this defibrillator campaign is something the Mirror's been fighting on for quite a while. It's been trying to get the law changed so that, because you have 30,000 heart attacks outside hospitals every year, and only 1 in 10 of them survive, it says in this article, Kevin. Now, last week, like you say, the government announced £1 million to allow communities to bid for their own device, but that's not very many defibrillators. So, I mean, what's the point? What is the point? Of giving someone almost no defibrillators? Yeah,
Foxy, there are more heart attacks outside hospital, but these are cardiac arrests where your heart actually stops, not where you have the most excruciating pains. You feel you're going to die and it can do damage to your heart. This is where your heart is actually physically stopped. And as the piece goes on, the health minister, Will Quince, says that if this happens, 3 to 5 minutes is really the longest you can go, because your chances of survival are increased by 40%, and you avoid brain damage and so on if oxygen's not going to the brain. But it is just infuriating that once again poorer people are getting the worst of a service, because defibs are a service, or a public service, and there are lots of people out there who learn how to use them on first aid courses. There's a lot of people who are medically trained, a lot of people in the NHS. If they see something, if they can get a device, they could save you. You and I could have a go, I'm sure. I've looked at the instructions when
I'll electrocute you anytime you ask, Kevin.
Yeah. Thanks you. I'd kind of hate it in a way. I'd be terrified of trying to use one. However, if there is someone dying next to you and it's how you save their life, it would be worse just to stand there and watch helplessly and do nothing.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, everybody? Have you had to use one of these defibrillators? Have you had a cardiac arrest and had your life saved by them? Do let us know. Get into the comments. Is it something that you think the government should be doing more about? I live in a fairly wealthy area in Kent, but my nearest defibrillator is in the village, which is about a mile and a half away. By the time, interesting you said 3 to 5 minutes, Kevin, because by the time I've got in my car, driven up the road, got the defibrillator, managed to ring 999, get the code, unlock the defibrillator, come back again, it would probably be 10 minutes. And if anyone in my house happens to have had a cardiac arrest, they're gone, because there isn't one locally, in lots of rural areas all around the country, rich and poor. Similar problems. You just don't have the access to them. And last week, I think it was in our paper, it might be one of the others, but I think it was revealed that most of these defibrillators all around the country, the few that we do have, they all have a PIN code to unlock them, which you get when you ring 999, but they need re-registering every 18 months onto a database. And lots of community organisations that have sorted these out forget to do that. And so you get into the very real possibility that someone could be having a cardiac arrest next to a defibrillator, and someone's rung 99 asking for the code and they don't have it, so you can't unlock it, and you die next to this defibrillator, which is kind of amazing. Why doesn't the government see that this is such a cheap, easy, tax-saving political win just to put a defibrillator in every school, as Leslie says here, in every hospital, in every corner shop, just attach them to street lampposts or something, I don't care, that you get rid of this PIN code database business. Why don't they just get on and fix it? Because this is such a good thing, and it's quite cheap. If it's £1 million for 1,000, then how much PPE is that? Yeah,
put them in more pubs. I've seen them in some pubs, because of course pubs open late, 11 o'clock. Corner shop, if it's going to be open late and it's signposted, the defibrillator is there so people know, then that's good. But you're right, you'll save lives, but in the long run you'll save money, because if you're going to stop people having really serious long-term, debilitating impacts of of a heart attack, their heart stopping and restarting too late, and so they're completely knackered or brain damaged, well, they'll need less medical care in the longer term. As you know, we often told about prevention. This is part of prevention.
Yeah, it saves a lot of money in the long run, doesn't it? Now, Leslie was asking, why aren't they first aid taught in schools? I think in some places they are, Leslie, but it's not. They're not being taught how to use a defibrillator. I don't think I really trust my 7-year-old with one, but should we go and defibrillate the cat? But it's one of those things that people should have more access to. Most people in their kitchens have got a little mini fire extinguisher or something. You can get those; they're very cheap. I'm sure there must be a fairly cheap way you could get a little home boom boom battery or something to give someone a quick kickstart while you're waiting for the ambulance. But yet that's not being rolled out or done either. We'll have to sort of see, won't we, if anything happens in the years to come as they focus more, as we're going to get on to talking about, and to prevention on the NHS. Now, do let us know your comments. Have you used defibrillators? Have you relied on them? Has one saved your life? Let us know in the comments. But in the meantime, let's go on to the main story of the day, which is, of course, the birthday of the NHS. On this day, in 1948, the Prince and Princess of Wales of the time did not ice a blue cake, but apparently that's how we mark it today. This was when Anna and Bevan ushered the birth of socialised healthcare into being, and it's done a sterling job saving a lot of lives, including mine. But as we all know, the grand old lady is not in the best of health herself at the moment. So on pages 12 and 13, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, the next Prime Minister, according to all the polls, has talked about how he's going to save the NHS. Now, I've looked very carefully through this, Kevin, and I can't see a single policy. Can you?
Yeah, well, if you get to the end of the piece where he says it's a service, not a shrine, absolutely, although it is the nearest we have to a national religion, which is why he and Rishi Sunak will be giving readings in Westminster Abbey today. Sunak and skipping PMQs as a result. He does say what it needs in the future is embracing new technologies. Mm-hmm. One, we both take that, I think. Focusing on preventative healthcare. Two, I think we both give that a tick. And third, ensuring there's far more community care. I think we both give that a tick. How you actually do that, well, it doesn't say, because there's no doubt that there's study after study. There's a big one from the King's report recently, of a foundation, very respected, authoritative on healthcare, saying in the UK, the NHS has been starved of investment, has the tightest financial straitjacket in its history. In the first 6-7 years of Conservative rule, it's been starved of investment, so it has far too staff, beds, and scanners to detect illnesses. It comes right low on the bottom of international leagues on things like beds and scanners. So healthcare has suffered. You're right. It's on its knees. It's wobbling. The NHS. I think it's our most precious public service. Even the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, who's been part of the problem, says it's a national treasure. I think he just recognises the great affection. And, it's around this time that you will get voices saying, "Ooh, we need reform, we need financial reform." What they really mean is make you pay. That is what they mean, but most of them dare not say that.
No. Well, June says, my husband had a cardiac arrest 14 years ago. Fortunately, he was in the GP surgery at the time. Best place for it, June. Let's face it. He now has an implanted defib. That's when they give you a sort of surgical fitting next to your heart that will just kickstart it if there's any kind of problem with the rhythm. Thank God for the NHS. Yes, and thank God for your husband's excellent choice of where to have his cardiac arrest as well, June, because that showed great forethought on his part. Well done to the doctors and everything else, and probably an absolute panic in the surgery when that happened. But I'm glad he's still with us, and well done the NHS for fitting his defib, because it means that all the fuss and the cost of that cardiac arrest for June's husband to start with, the ambulance, the doctors, the aftercare, the going to the hospital, all this kind of stuff, it is fixed by fitting the little internal zip, which means that if it does happen again, he gets a little readout and says that it's happened, and then he can go and see the doctor in his own time, and it's just less expensive, and they can give him the right pills and they can sort it out. But that's only because he was lucky enough in where he had his cardiac arrest. People who've got that coming, quite often, if you've got a heart condition, you may not know about it until you hit the deck, and it's a bit late. And that's where things like screenings and preventative healthcare would come in, doesn't it, Kevin? But I mean, Keir Starmer's talking about this stuff, but he's just not being specific about what exactly or how it's going to be paid for, or how we're going to do it if people are going to keep voting for their taxes to get cut.
No, Labour had a workforce plan before the government. In fact, when the government announced its own workforce plan last Friday, Labour said, well, congratulations, you've nicked our idea. But the truth is, and there's about 140 billion spent on the NHS every year. Yes, that's a lot of money. However, internationally, we spend less on healthcare than most comparable advanced industrial democracies. And if you want better healthcare, we got to invest it more in doctors, in nurses, other staff, in buildings, and in equipment. There's just no way around it. And we'll all gain from it. But yeah, you've got to be prepared and say you'll let your taxes go up for it. Exactly. The Johnson government, you recall, was increasing national insurance to pay for social care, but the increase got reversed.
Yeah, Sunak didn't want to do that as Chancellor, did he? And then it soon got reversed. And then now there's kind of going. And now Leslie says we pay for our NHS through the payment of general taxation, not just income and national insurance. Remove the NHS. What exactly are we paying those taxes for? Well, Leslie, clearly we're paying it for the roads to be fixed. We're paying it for the schools to have enough teachers and enough books. We're paying it for the streetlights to mostly work. We're paying it for the social care we don't have. And I wouldn't be surprised, if there was a government that came in at some point and found that, just like in Vladimir Putin's Russia, someone had been clearing out the bank account while they were in power. Because like Leslie, I don't really know quite where the money seems to have gone. Yeah. There's been talk about, unfortunately, in the last few days, about cutting bureaucracy in the NHS, and that's the way to save money. But it's the bureaucrats, Kevin, that keep the NHS on its toes. It means that your medical notes are in the right place and in the right form when you have your surgery. It means there's a bed been organised for you to be in after your surgery. It means there is a doctor and a radiographer and they've got the right bits and equipment. It means the electrician has actually maintained all the stuff that they need to use for their jobs. It means someone is cleaning the wards. It means that all these things are organised. The pen pushers in the NHS are in the majority for the simple reason that you can't do successful brain surgery if someone hasn't organised it all first. We're in a minority because you don't need a lot of them. You just need enough. But the institution is massive because of everything else it has to do. We can't cut bureaucrats. So where's the money going to come? It's just going to come from taxation, you think? There's just going to have to be tax rises. There's no other way to...
Yeah. I think it was the King's Fund again, which showed that it's a kind of myth that the NHS has more managers. They looked at other organisations of a comparable size and just found that wasn't the case. And the phrases bureaucrats, pen pushers usually are used in a very pejorative way. But when you ring or go to a doctor's surgery or you go to a hospital, you need receptionists. There, you need organizations to be managed. It's absolutely the case. And look, all institutions, companies, our individual lives can be improved in some way, and that would be true of the NHS. You want to get the most for every pound spent, but to keep running it down and pretending there is some magic solution by getting rid of managers is absolutely nonsense. I mean, I'm sure some are overpaid. We would think, but that's because it's in a market with private companies. If they're paying top dollar, then the NHS, if it wants the best people, has to pay top dollar too. It's the way it is. Yeah. We often hear, Foxy, too, that taxation in the UK is at its highest overall level since almost the Second World War. Truth is, that might be the case, but it's still relatively lower than, say, in France. But we get a national health service. I mean, look, some taxes will have to go up. It's which taxes go up and who do you tax more?
Exactly.
You could get 20-odd billion by just equalising capital gains tax with income tax. I've never understood why people who get capital gains should pay a lower rate of tax. I think you could just do that, and you'd solve all the NHS's problems instantly with money. You wouldn't have to put up anyone else's income.
Prime Minister, everybody. He's got it sorted. Or have a word with Rachel Reeves the next time you see her in Parliament and let her know.
She's frightened of the backlash. She's frightened of the backlash in right-wing papers and people who are wealthy saying this is absolutely terrible. You're taking away our tax perks for them to work as hard. But nonsense.
Yes, right. A bit like suggesting that all of them should get paid double and have half as many of them, and that therefore it won't cost taxpayers anything. Let's move the MPs further away from the people they actually represent, so they have to do more representing, therefore actually end up doing less, and get more for it, and we'll improve the quality. We wouldn't get more Boris Johnsons. Mike says, I'm sure we'll be okay by the end of the year. Reducing NHS waiting list by the end of the year was one of Rishi's 5 promises. Not long now. How is he going on these 5 pledges, Kevin? Because Rishi was tackled on this yesterday, and he seemed to brush most of them off. So it's
the boats, it could be he doesn't stop them. Could be a record number this year. Economic growth, well, it's not there. Interest rates mean it could plunge the economy into recession. National debt has gone up to it's topped 100% of GDP, highest level since 1961. Inflation stubbornly stick at 8.7%. It hasn't been halved, just over 10% when he made that pledge. Or they could hit that one by the end of the year. And waiting lists have gone up to a record 7.4 million instead of going down. No, it failed on all 5. So no, it's absolutely nonsense. He's not a man with a plan. He's a man without a clue.
Now, Rishi Sunak's obviously very busy trying to sort out the nuclear test veterans medal, so that's why he hasn't got round to the other 5 priorities. We were priority number 0.5, so we should have been there first. We shall see, won't we? And of course, Keir Starmer can't really mention any specific policies because Labour hasn't agreed them yet. The National Policy Forum is meeting over the course of this summer to actually sort out the next manifesto. So hopefully, at least by the end of the year, even if things have got worse, Mike, we would actually get some plans as to how they might get better at some point in the medium to long-term future. We'll have to see, won't we? Do let us know what you think. What do you think Keir Starmer should do? What do you think the policies should be? Do you feel that he should be saying more and doing more at this stage, and that it's too important just to say, look, I've used the NHS, I know how important it is, we're going to do something, just trust me, because that's not really cutting the mustard, I would suggest. Now, there is a second step within the paper, which is about really sort of, we've had Wes Streeting, for example, the stress and shadow health sector has been talking about retaining access to healthcare. Come on, Kevin. It's actually got an actual paper. Look at him. He's been out and bought it.
I'm old school.
Mine comes on an iPad, I'm afraid, everybody. But he's been talking about making the NHS fit for the 21st century, perhaps retaining some kind of private parts to the NHS. But on pages 30 and 31 here, we've got people who have given some stories of what that might mean. They've spoken to people for a book to mark the NHS's 75th birthday. And this is all about life, sort of what it was like before the NHS. And there's one here in the bottom right about a tonsil operation on the kitchen table, which I'm just going to read to you, everybody. So I hope you're sitting comfortably. Joan Pearton, who's born in Oldham in the days before the NHS, her family used to access healthcare by paying subscriptions. Right, it's a bit like insurance or a voucher scheme or something. You bought your subs and then you could access some healthcare when you needed it. What a great idea. That's what insurance is supposed to be like, isn't it? But operations performed at home saved the cost of a hospital stay. So Jones said, I didn't even go to a hospital when I needed my tonsils removing. I was around 4. I distinctly remember my mother scrubbing the kitchen table one Sunday morning. That was the first I knew something was going to take place. I can remember being put on the table, the doctor saying to me, do you like perfume, Joan? And they put something over my face. And this obviously was the analgesia. I woke up later wailing my throat hurt and I was given an ice cream. Kevin, that is exactly the fact that, we've got with a so-called insurance model, you would have people who are finding or given a cheaper option. Well, it's cheaper for you to do this at home, of course. It's just cheaper for you to do this way or the other way, or not to have this care, or not bother with the analgesia. You can get some money off for that. And that's how we would end up with people giving birth on the kitchen table again, wouldn't we?
Well, it'd be some people couldn't afford it. There's no doubt. And whatever they say you'd save on tax, bet my bottom dollar you'd end up paying more in insurance. You'd end up quibbling over the terms and conditions, little T and C's, as you would on any any claim you make from home or in a car. But no, it's why the NHS was so welcomed when it was created, and why it's so valuable now. I don't think we'd go back to 1948 if it was somehow abolished or disappeared, which it won't. But you got to remember that the alternatives are more expensive and won't be as good for the majority of the population. I look at the states, which a lot of the right wing in British politics always goes over. They're enthralled with the US. But no, you lose your job, you lose your medical cover. People can't afford cancer drugs. It's absolutely appalling. Waiting lists are a form of rationing in the UK. There's no doubt about that, where people have to wait. Back in 2010, when Labour went out of power, the target for treatment, you go to see your doctor when treatment to start was 18 weeks. 92% of people got that. 46% now. Waiting lists were going up pretty rapidly during the 2010s before COVID. Yes, they've shot up by more since. But I'm afraid the NHS needs a bit of TLC and cash. That's what it needs. It's been constantly reformed and it's innovated throughout its history. But at the moment, it's just been neglected. I need somebody who really cares about it. And we as voters have to make sure there is a government that really cares about it. Otherwise, we'll lose what we cherish. I think the NHS is a precious public service that we should literally fight to the death to retain.
I think perhaps half the problem is the fact that the people who can remember what it was like with the NHS are not with us, and that people are therefore just a little bit blasé about what the options are if you don't have this all the time. Now, Beverly says, am I the only one who thinks the Tories are just going round and round in circles, as they have no idea of what to do? They have caused these huge problems because of their ideology and inability to deal with the post-pandemic and economic problems we now face. I think they are going round and round in circles, Beverly, specifically circling the plug hole. And they, despite, the workforce plan that Rishi Sunak announced, I was quite impressed with that for the simple reason that was a really long-term plan. And he knows he's going to be nowhere near being able to take credit for it when it comes through. He's very much setting something up for someone else to take credit for, which, was admirable in a sense, I suppose. That's how most politics is supposed to work. But it is still not necessarily properly funded and not quite enough, as we know. But what do you think, everybody? Are we just eulogizing the NHS? Are we treating it like a shrine, and we should be a bit more sensible about how it needs reforming, and things do need cutting, or things do need rationing a bit more, so that people who are wealthier pay a bit more, perhaps, other than they already do through their taxes, to sort out what's wrong with the NHS? Get into the comments and let us know. The one final question, Kevin, the $1 million question: is the NHS safe if Labour comes to power? Are we going to get what we need from it?
It does much better under Labour, in Labour hands. It's certainly safer, and it was transformed 1997 to 2010. That Labour government, many failings in that Labour government. The NHS was a huge success. If you've got a new hospital or a new health centre, it's probably because it was built then. There were a lot more nurses and doctors. Waiting lists came way down. Response times were hit much better, so they did turn it round. Scott said, "We'll do it again." Back in '97, they inherited a growing economy. This one's going to be stumbling forever, shackled by Brexit. The public finances are certainly worse, but if you've got a political will, there's always a way.
Yeah, hopefully. But the other thing is to remember was after '97, Tony Blair's government did shackle them with a lot of NHS trusts with private finance initiatives that the interest payments on which have also helped to cripple some trusts and not been particularly helpful. So let's hope they don't work very well. But thank you for that. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Do go into the comments and let us know. What do you think about the need for defibrillators? Is that one of those things that you think a new Labour government should be funding? Do you think the NHS needs to change and reform? If so, how? And how are we going to pay for it? Do you mind paying more taxes if you get better healthcare as a result? And when would you expect that to happen? Do let us know. We'll have a little wrap at the end. But first, we have found some good news in the world. Here it is. Now, Pam Clark who's there in the orange, is 73. She's nearly as old as the NHS itself. And for the past 20 years, she's been flying the friendly skies as the UK's oldest stewardess, or flight attendants as they're known these days. Now, she's known as Nana Pam to her regulars. Isn't that sweet? But she's about to be a great grandmother, and she has welcomed 800,000 passengers aboard over 4,500 flights, and is encouraging other over 45s to give themselves a new challenge and go out to work after the family flies the nest. Now, Kevin, is this proof, do you think, that if you keep people fit and healthy and kicking and off the kitchen table for major surgical procedures, that they can be tax-generating units for decades to come?
Yeah, and poor without decent pensions, I think, pass pension. Sorry, no, this is she's
a good news section, Kevin.
Look. Good for her. You wanted to reach for the sky. She's a former hairdresser. What's missing in the piece is how much she is paid and what you have to do for that, because flights go early morning, late at night, weekends. It's a pretty demanding job, and I suspect that EasyJet are struggling to get younger people. So they're having to go for older sections of the workforce. But you're right. Actually, some people want to continue working. Some have to. Some want to. They find it interesting. It's part of what they do. I don't think it's as glamorous as it was in the 50s being a flight attendant, because you kind of land in Malaga, then you straight back round, selling scratch cards, and would you like an overpriced cup of coffee to make extra money for the airline? But Pam seems to be very happy, so I'm very happy for her.
That's the important thing. It may well be that when people are older have to get back into work because they haven't got enough money to live on, but that means you do get a bit more money to live on. And as we all know, wealth helps keep you a bit healthier for longer. And of course, as well, if she has any problems, I'm pretty certain that all planes have a defibrillator on board, don't they?
Yeah, I think they do. But I never understood this.
Good place to be when you're 73.
Yeah. There was a terrible sexism in the airline industry where they had this focus on, it's a pejorative term, trolley dollies, as they would call them. And, I'm sure I'd be delighted to be served by a Pam if I'm on an EasyJet flight, and I'd be happy to be served by somebody in their 20s. If people can work, age is no barrier. Fit, healthy, they're keen, enthusiastic, that's great. And I think people Pam's age, if they choose to work, that's fine. I think if they have to work financially, then I think that's a little sad.
Yeah. And that's perhaps one of the benefits of actually talking about what the NHS gives us, not just the cost all the time and how much is the price of this, that, and the other, but actually the benefit. The benefit is maybe an extra £1 trillion on the economy from people who can go to work because they're not crippled by childbirth, for example, because they haven't died at the age of 40, because they can survive major incidents, they can survive cancers, they can survive car wrecks, they can survive heart attacks, and they go on and they keep living the rest of their lives. June's back, says, the Tories are more interested in lining their own pockets than saving the NHS. If we cut the MPs' salaries, that would be a boost for the NHS. It's worth pointing out, I did a column on this earlier in the week, Kevin, I'm going to say it again, Camp Binface, the satirical joke candidate for the Uxbridge and one of the satirical joke candidates for the Uxbridge and South Ruislip by-election to replace Boris Johnson, has in his manifesto a plan to link MPs' pay to that of nurses for the next century. Can you think of a better policy for the next Labour manifesto, Kevin, that everyone would actually really get behind?
Yeah, you could do that. I suspect, it probably wouldn't change how people vote. Would you get better MPs or worse MPs? I'm not sure. I don't think MPs are underpaid by any means. They must be in the top 5% of income earners. And actually, I don't want people to go into politics for the money.
No, that's not what they should be there for.
Yeah, because they've got a public service ethos. That's what you want. And there's no evidence anyway paying MPs more will get better quality. Look at Rishi Sunak. No,
then it does tend to be only the millionaires who say that. And they seem to think that only other millionaires are people of any value with anything to add. Yeah. I would suggest that Nana Pam would do quite well if she got into Parliament. I would suggest that just about June could be in Parliament. And do quite a good job, especially as it came to the defibrillators. June for Health Secretary, I'd be quite happy with that. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, for taking part. We've got to bring it to an end there. Thank you, Kevin, for explaining that to us. Good luck, the NHS, in all you do. Have a happy birthday, and let's hope that before long there is actually a Labour policy written down somewhere that people can decide whether or not that would be beneficial to the NHS in the long term, because we all rely on her, even those who don't like her very much or have to complain about her. If you have a heart attack in the street, it's the NHS you would want, isn't it? Thank you, everybody, for taking part. If you're listening on podcast, please leave us a review so other people can find us. Until then, happy birthday to the NHS and to everyone who's been born in her. And we will see you again on Monday for another edition of the News Agenda. Till then, tatty bye.